Hello everybody, hope everyone is safe and healthy. Today we will introduce the pinnacle of our Sound United products, our Classé Delta flagship series. And joining us today is our very own lead visionary, Dave Nauber, our Classé brand director for a special tour in his home in Connecticut. So welcome and thanks for joining us, Dave.
Thanks, Frederick. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Good morning, Dave, or actually is it afternoon for you?
Still morning here on the East Coast of North America.
Mhm. So Dave, what would be nice is for you to give us a history or just a brief understanding of Class A as we get started, because some people may not be as familiar with the brand as we are. So would you like to do that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Classé is a French-Canadian brand founded near Montreal, Canada, and it started with uh, an audiophile named Mike Viglas and a very talented engineer named David Reich. David had been building amplifiers in his home under the brand name Ellison, and this was in 1979. It was very common at that time. This is, you can imagine, it's pre-digital days. It was common for high-end electronics brands to start in this very small way where someone would build products in their house. In fact, that's the way Marantz started many years before. So David Reich met Mike Viglas. Mike was a fairly successful businessman who happened to be an audiophile, super passionate about music and about sound quality. And Mike liked David very much. He invested money into the company. They named it Classé, so it began in 1980, and off they went. The first product was a stereo amplifier, 25 watts per channel, and it operated in pure Class A, hence the inspiration for the brand name. The accent on the E reminds you also that it's French Canadian. Mike ran the company. I joined the company in 2002. And the next thing you know, we become part of Sound United in January of 2018.
Can you talk about where Class A will be built?
Yes, it's an important part of the story because when you look at the history of high-end audio, you see a gradual transition of the products. The products introduced digital circuitry and digital control, and the way that products are built has evolved over the years. The notion of having a very small team and building everything by hand with a soldering iron really is not. It's really not the way you want to build a high-end product today, because certain things can be built much more consistently if you combine both handwork and things that are done by an automated process. So that requires a bit more sophistication. We've transitioned from a Montreal-based manufacturing. For a while, as we were owned by Bowers and Wilkins, we had products built in Zhuhai, China, which was part of a Bowers and Wilkins factory. And today we're in Shirakawa, Japan, at Shirakawa Audio Works, and it's in northern Japan. It is a very sophisticated production facility, one that allows us to execute on our designs at the very highest level. And I would say one of the most important things is not to be able to build a fantastic sounding amplifier or preamp. It's to build hundreds of them and to have them all be exactly the same. And that requires very sophisticated production capabilities, the likes of which nobody, in my opinion, competes with Shirakawa Audio Works.
Sound United is a group of brands, and a lot of times it's the smaller brands that it's the little things such as Wi-Fi and digital and those types of things that Dave just talked about that require a lot of engineering and a lot of engineering resources. So a lot of times, if you look at it like a car, the exotic cars, it's the electrical systems that fail. because they just don't have the engineering resources to put behind the windshield wipers and the air conditioning and the navigation system. So if you look at like Volkswagen, which owns Lamborghini, the quality of Lamborghini has went up substantially because now the Lamborghini engineers can focus on the things that make it a Lamborghini, and they can go utilize the manufacturing and some of the engineering resources to do the little basic things that you would expect from a car. So
Yeah,
being
Phil,
having
that's sorry to interrupt, Phil. That's a really important point, and I'm glad you brought it up. The ability to produce the best sounding audio equipment doesn't really have a lot to do with HDMI, for example. So all high-end electronics companies that employ HDMI buy HDMI from somebody else. The fact that we get HDMI from a tier one company, it's we're getting it from the best. It means we'll get the not only quality but also the latest technology. So super important to us.
Yes. So the goal is to give you ultra high performance and consistency and reliability. So this preamp is special too. It looks a little different. One thing I love about it, Dave, and when I first saw it, is it's unintimidating because the only thing you see on it is a touchscreen and a knob. It's not a million switches, but there's a huge amount of capability built in to this preamp by utilizing a touchscreen. So why don't you talk about why you went to a touchscreen instead of the traditional, a whole bunch of switches and things like that?
The concept behind the touchscreen is that um, well, a couple of things. One is you can provide a lot of flexibility in the way the product is set up without having to have the complexity of a very complicated faceplate with lots of buttons. Another is that you can change the way the product works without having to change the faceplate. You can add buttons, remove buttons, change the way the buttons talk to each other, and so on. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. It also, as you point out, simplifies the operation. So all of the system setup that you do can be used to automatically switch configurations and so on, make the unit adapt itself to whatever your chosen source is. The concept behind the preamp is that we want it to be able to connect to a wide variety of sources, everything from phono to network sources. And we want it to be able to be configured so that when each of those sources is chosen, the preamp sets itself up as if it was only ever designed to accommodate that source. For example, when you choose phono, you tap the screen and choose the input. When I choose phono, the configuration is what's called bypass, which means that the digital circuitry gets switched off, making the unit as quiet as it can possibly be. It's as if there's just a phono stage with a volume control and an output buffer as your preamp. It's as if you've got a preamp that was only ever designed to handle a turntable.
Now, Dave,
Yeah.
one thing that's kind of nice about this amplifier as we go through there, we're going to talk about how powerful this thing is, but we also want to talk about the user interface. I like a lot of adjustments and I like a lot of controls and I want to have that power. My wife does not. And what I love about this thing is how many sources can you connect to this preamplifier if you wanted to? If you want to go absolutely berserk and connect everything.
18.
Do you remember? 18. So there's the ability to plug in 18 different things to the back of this preamp. But many of people may only have 2 or 3. Say they have a disc player, a turntable, and maybe a network music player. Now, when he touches that screen, you can see all of the different inputs. But if I only have 3 inputs, I can hide the remainders, and the button sizes will change. So instead of being 9 little buttons, it would just be 3 big buttons on there. So my wife can go up, hit the button she wants, and turn the knob for volume, and she's 100% happy. But if I want to go in and make adjustments and tweaks and change a bunch of things and get into a parametric EQ and go into bass and do all that stuff. I have all of that stuff capability as well. So to the person that does not want to play with all of that stuff and they just want to enjoy music and not think about it, they get that. And for that person that really wants to fine tune it to make it fit their particular needs and taste, you have the ability to do that. And it's all from this very stylish and simple looking user display.
Yeah, you mentioned when you tap the screen and you see your sources, there are 9 here, and there's a button to take me to another page, and I've got 6 more on that page. So these are 15 that are selected for default from the factory, but that gives you an example of if you only have 6, how it would be 6 larger buttons. Okay, so a couple of other things. The volume control is very high resolution analog volume control. By high resolution, I mean that it allows us to select the level in quarter decibel steps. And the reason that's important is because the playback level helps to establish the perspective. So for example, if you're listening to classical music and the recording is a kind of a mid-hall perspective recording, you need to be able to adjust the volume to give you the proper mid-hall perspective level. And it's frustrating if the choices you've got on a stepped attenuator make you choose either something that's a little bit too loud or a little bit too soft. Once you've used a control like this, which is like a continuous volume control, you won't want to ever go back. The other thing is you could go to an even higher resolution control. You could do 10th decibel steps, but there, the problem is that they're so tiny that you have to spin the volume knob many, many, many times to go a relatively short distance or change in level. And so this is, I think, the perfect combination of small step size that feels continuous and yet large enough that it doesn't take forever to change the volume. Let me just take the cover off of this guy. I'll show you, have you see a peek under the hood.
Okay. Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
This is as you go in. This is a 2-channel amplifier. How many D-to-A converters are in this thing? How many DACs are in?
Yeah, eight channels of D-to-A conversion. Yes, not counting
2-channel.
Not counting the subwoofer. Yeah, right.
And there's a DAC with a subwoofer.
That's
Why?
right. So well, the reason is that the entire signal path is fully balanced. Whether you're talking about a phono stage, which is fully balanced, I have mine phono my tone arm cable wired as a balanced cable, so I can have a fully balanced signal from my cartridge all the way to the loudspeaker. The digital side is also fully balanced. So a balanced signal is one that has what we call an inverting and a non-inverting half. So there are two signal paths within a balanced signal for each channel. That would give us 4 DACs if we had just 1 DAC per leg of the balanced signal. But we treat each leg of the balanced signal as if it were balanced as well. So there's a plus and minus for the inverted, plus and minus for the non-inverted. That's 4 DAC channels for the left channel, and then the same thing for the right channel. So yeah, so it's a lot, plus the subwoofer.
Yeah. So I thought that was absolutely amazing. So let's go back into the inside of this.
Well, the thing I wanted to point out in here particularly is the circuit board that's in the back. The preamp has an option to include HDMI inputs. So you can buy a card, $500, 500 euros, with 4 HDMI inputs and 1 HDMI output. And this gives you a way to have what we call convenience switching. So like I have a set-top box that goes into mine and other, a Blu-ray player and so on. So if you have AV sources, you can run both audio and video through the Delta PRE. We'll take the audio as a stereo audio signal and handle it better than it could be handled through other means. We'll pass the video signal on straight to the display device, So you just choose which thing you want to watch and listen to, just a single source select, instead of having to do it also on the TV or also on a surround processor or something like that.
Yes. So yeah, so that's so it's not in surround, but it is
Right.
but it does allow you to plug, because I have a TV in my office, and sometimes you just want to play the sound from what's on the video display through the unit. Or say you have like, for example, I have an Oppo Blu-ray player, and Oppo can do, like, really high-end Rune integration, and I could use that to feed as a way to provide a Rune to the preamp, if I so choose to. So there's maybe some applications where you may want to utilize that little something that has an HDMI out as a way to feed the signal into the preamp. So you have that option as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's very easy to install as well. The preamp comes from the factory with a blank panel on the back, and there are just 2 screws that you remove. You put the circuit board in and press it down on some connectors, and then connect some wires, and put the 2 screws on the back panel, and you're done. You
yes,
update the firmware, and away you go. So it's a
yes.
very simple installation.
Yes, and Dave always cracks me up when it comes to his demos at the shows. He is kind of the ultimate Renaissance man. If he goes digital, he goes high-end digital, um, high res, super high res digital files off of off of like high quality hard drives and all that stuff, or he goes reel to reel. Or so he goes true high-end analog, and then true high-end digital. In fact, like he mentioned before, he has XLRs on his turntable. So he's got an XLR based input for his turntable, dual reel-to-reels, and a huge amount of digital files that he runs off of. What do you use, a Mac Mini to for?
Yeah, I have a Mac Mini that I use at home for a hard drive, but I also use streaming services. I use Rune, Tidal, Qobuz, and when I'm on the road, I have a MacBook Pro laptop. I prefer solid state hard drives. They do sound better, and if you do everything right, even a Redbook, what we call Redbook CD, a normal CD quality recording, 1644, can sound amazingly good.
The other thing, Dave, that we want to talk about is we always have to factor in the room itself, right? So there's lots of adjustments, things such as subwoofer outputs and low pass and high pass and parametric EQs and all of the other things. So if you really want to go in and tailor this thing to fit your needs, you can do so. So there's a little button that looks very nondescript on the side of that guy. That is the menu button. It has like the 3 little lines. So if you go into that menu button right there, that opens up a wealth of different things that you can do with this and adjustments you can make with this preamp. Can you go through that real quick?
Sure. You can choose output configurations, or you think of them as output configurations, where maybe for some sources you want to use a subwoofer and other ones not, or maybe you want to set the system up where when I choose a set-top box, my subwoofer is on at 80 hertz, and when I choose my computer for USB music, the subwoofer switches to 50 hertz, and when I choose my turntable, the subwoofer switch is off. So you can automate all that stuff, a normal balance and balance control and mono, and then there's a tone control. The tone control is available to be used as a normal bass and treble control, or it can be used as what we call a tilt control. A tilt control has the mid-range flat with inflection points below which bass and above which treble can be adjusted. So the way it works from the factory is we have inflection points at 200 and 2000 hertz. And if you tilt the tonal balance toward the highs, you will raise the high frequencies while simultaneously suppressing the low frequencies by the same amount. And if you turn the tilt toward the lows, then the opposite happens. You raise the lows and suppress the highs. So if you've got a recording that is particularly dull, you can liven it up by tilting the tonal balance up. If it's particularly bright, you can just warm it up by tilting the tonal balance down. So the tilt control is extremely useful, especially if you're using the Classé app, because you can access it easily from the app and make the adjustment from one recording to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll say, so between the tilt control, the traditional tone control, the parametric equalization, the bass management capabilities, you can, and the ability to set all of those things up individually based on what source or what you're listening to, the flexibility of getting this to sound right for each source is perfect. Because give me an example, because you had an example about how you use it. Your turntable is one way, and the other.
I think it's an important point that, you know, it used to be in the old days that preamp that had a lot of features, it gave you those features by compromising performance. These features are DSP based, they're digital domain based, and so they don't add circuitry into the signal path. These features are all performance based. So everything about the extra things that you can do with this preamp help you get the best possible performance from it. In the case of the turntable setup, for example, we allow you to, I'm gonna hit menu, system setup, phono setup, choose the phono. I've got moving magnet, moving coil, low output moving coil, and high output moving coil. Of course, the sun comes in at the wrong time. And I've got loading. So the loading will vary depending on the type of cartridge I say I have. I can choose to have key buttons on my remote control give commands for each of the loading options. So either from the faceplate here, I can change the loading. Instead of having to open up the preamp and throw dip switches inside, I can do it simply from the touchscreen, very easy. And if I want, from my remote control or from my app, I can switch between different loading options. So you could sit in your listening chair with the record playing and switch between a couple of different loading options to choose which is best. It's really the easiest way to be sure that you're getting the setup that is optimum for that cartridge.
Yeah, and if you wanted to, when I hit phono, you can have the sub turn on, we'll have the sub turn off, have the sub crossover setting change, and have it be different than when I'm playing a CD or reel-to-reel. So when I hit the input, like I said, simple. Once you set this up, your spouse or someone who's not technically savvy or wants to play with it, when they go to turntable, they're going to get the best sound. So depending on how you want it set up, subwoofer off, subwoofer on. If I go to CD, it may click the subwoofer on and change the crossover setting. If I have my TV set up, it may go in and turn the sub up and change its crossover setting. So you can literally minutely fine tune this. And then once it's set up, the average user just hits the button to switch the input, and all of the magic happens in the background. We could spend hours just going through the menu. I've been in the store and started going through that with people, the menu system and all the power, and they're absolutely shocked at some of all the different controls and flexibility you have. That's kind of hidden from the average user who does not want to play with it. But if you're someone that wants to really get into it and fine tune it, it is there for you. Same quality as Dave mentioned before, the Rhodium. So all the connections are Rhodium.
You have, if you're going to use copper, just like on an RCA connector, you can't leave the copper bare because it will corrode. So you plate it with something, and you often see gold plating on connectors. That's the most common type, even among relatively inexpensive components. And gold looks nice, and it implies a certain level of expense, and it won't corrode. It's a precious metal. It's not very durable. It scratches really easy because it's super soft. But the problem with gold really is that it cannot be plated directly onto copper, you have to have a barrier metal in between, usually something like nickel. So the gold connectors that you see on most components, you think gold is a great conductor, and it is, but when it has to go through nickel to get to copper, it's not so great. So the better solution is to use rhodium. Rhodium is the rarest of precious metals. It costs more than gold. It can be plated directly onto copper, and it's extremely durable, so far more durable than copper. So it lasts more than the lifetime of the product. So while being expensive, it really is the best solution. You'll see that on the RCA connectors as well as the speaker connectors, and on the preamp as well, as you see there on the screen.
The fit and finish is absolutely outstanding, just like the amplifier. The quality of the boards are at the highest level to ensure that everything about this preamp is built to the standards that you would expect. There was one more thing, the app on your phone. Yes. Because we're getting towards the end, and then we'll go back and do some Q&A. So let's talk about the app real quick, because that is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, so the app is designed to look in a way like the preamp. So the color scheme is the same, and you'll notice that we have a very big volume knob, which is the equivalent of the volume knob on the unit. If you go to either the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, you can download the Classé app, and there's a demo mode. The demo mode will show you all the different features. The demo mode was set up with the previous generation preamp called the CP800. So it has a blue touchscreen instead of the gray scale that we're using on the Delta PRE, but otherwise it works in the same way. It'll give you an idea of how the Delta PRE would actually work. You can see when I adjust the preamp by rotating my thumb, it changes the volume.
Yeah.
If I tap this button down here in the lower left, again, it's trying to get rid of the.
You're good. You had it. You had it. Okay, there you go.
I can go to tone control. That's the tilt control. If I tap it again, it becomes ordinary bass and treble. So I can switch between bass and treble and tilt simply, or switch back.
Go back and do the tilt again, and then turn the knob so they can kind of see how that works. So you could see. Now, he was talking about those inflection points. If you want to change where that occurs, what'd you say it was? It was at, what were the numbers?
202,000.
Yeah, so that's where it starts to move. You could change that by going into the amplifier and making that adjustment.
Yeah, so, you know, we did a lot of listening. My friends think my whole job is just to listen to music. So anyway, it's kind of funny. We did a lot of listening and experimenting, and the values of 200 and 2,000 leave the broad mid-range alone, and they do a nice job of just tweaking the extremes. And from my experience, it really does work extremely well with a really wide variety of recordings. But if you want something else, you're free to do whatever you want. You can make the inflection points at 37 hertz or at 500 hertz or whatever for the bass, and 1,000 hertz or 3,000 or 3,500 or whatever you want for the treble. So it's very configurable from the point of view of the user.
Awesome. Someone was asking, is there a home theater bypass? There's a couple of bypass modes, but is that provided, home theater bypass?
Yeah, we call it pass-through. So it's basically where you're passing the signal through, the front channels of a home theater come through and go out of the preamp without having been either amplified or attenuated. So it's called pass-through. You just set up an input and assign it the pass-through mode, and that will happen.
On the front panel of the PRE, you have a USB input. Could you explain what that's for?
Yeah, a couple of things. It's set up to support all iOS devices, first of all. So you can plug an iPhone or an iPad into it. It will charge that device, and you can play music from it. It's also used for firmware upgrades. So you would go to the website, you would take the firmware file, download it, put it on the USB stick, put the USB stick in the front, switch the power on, it would extract it automatically and do its own update. And then lastly, if you wanted to extract settings from a preamp, or if you wanted to load settings from a preamp into another preamp, you can import and export settings using a USB stick. When you put the USB stick into the front of the unit while the unit's on, it will ask you if you want to import or export settings.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the Pre does not have a media player aspect to it, so you wouldn't be able to connect a hard drive or a USB key with some music files on it, right?
That's correct. We've taken the position that the media player ought to exist in other things. It should not be part of your expensive high-end preamplifier because it's more likely to get outdated that way. So better to have a media player elsewhere.
Okay, I have one last question from an online user, and he's wondering if I play Tidal through an iPhone or an iPad and I stream it using AirPlay, I'm limited to 44.1 because that's the limitation of AirPlay. What should I do if I want to use Tidal high res on the Pre?
I connect it to a Mac Mini, so I don't use it from an iOS device. I use it from a portable device. I use it from a Mac Mini or a MacBook Pro. So I would say connect a laptop or a computer of some kind, either by USB or by with a network connection. Either one.
Yes. Exactly. So yeah. So PC is a great way to go. A small media player. There are some Chromecast enabled devices that actually go far beyond what AirPlay 2 can do, and you can utilize one of those as well. But a PC via asynchronous DAC or like I said, is a great way to go. Now, we do want to stress the amplifiers have XLRs and they are fully balanced. Okay, so you're talking about it is a balanced amplifier with XLRs, so we definitely want to stress that. Karsten asked about updating via Wi-Fi. There's no Wi-Fi capability built in to the amplifiers or the preamp, so you would download the software and then plug the USB in to do any
Yeah, well, let me just throw in one thing there, Phil. It reminds me that we didn't talk about Wi-Fi. And while there is no Wi-Fi, there is, of course, the Ethernet connection. And for quite a while in my own system, I did not have an Ethernet connection from my router into this room. And so I used an Airport Express to make a Wi-Fi connection. And then from that box, used a wire into the back of my preamp. You can do that or any kind of a wireless bridge. I have a Netgear wireless bridge right now that I use. So it is possible to bring Wi-Fi into the room where the preamp is and then connect from a small box to the preamp.
I think you've done that at shows too, to utilize the app, to show the app. Look, I can use the app and everything else, and that's what he brings to shows. He'll bring like an Airport Express. Okay.
Yeah.
The same would work if you use a router as well, right? If the device is directly connected.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what about over-the-air updates? If your Pre is connected to the internet, is the only way to update using downloading and putting on a USB, or would it be able to do this over the air?
You have the two options. One is downloading and putting a USB stick in, and the other is doing the update from the web page of the preamp. But we don't push updates to the preamp. So we may change our opinion on that in the past. We haven't done it because we were we were thinking that it was better for the customer to make a conscious decision that they wanted to do the upgrade, and it would just simplify things. We're at the point now where we can do it, I think, with enough confidence, and the customer can always decide to reject an upgrade that's available. So in the future, maybe with the HEOS module, we'll start pushing upgrades that way.
There's one thing that we didn't talk about is if you need a driver, you need a driver for PC, but you don't need one for Mac. Is that correct?
Correct. If you want to do a USB connection and DSD, you need a driver for a PC, and that's on the website.
Yes.
So easy to do. Very easy.
Yes.
I think we're through all the questions, Dave.
So
Great.
Dave, thank you
My pleasure.
for coming again. Hopefully you guys have learned a lot. And for everyone who came and hung out with us today, thank you again. And we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.